Hey guys, this is Yoda. In this video, we'll talk about a new VDH build that I have been testing, calling it the No Soul Crush build or the old Last Resort build since in Dragonflight Season 4, this style of build was pretty popular, especially on Fortified, back when Fortified and Tyrannical were separated. We didn't have the extra point here to put into either Soul Crush or Soul Carver since Feed the Demon costs 2 points, but it's basically the same build from back then, or you can play like this. A lot of people played this in the TGP on Fortified. It has not been as popular of late. However, in my opinion, in the current dungeon pool, it's very useful in 2 dungeons for sure, and potentially 2 more. So the main dungeon I like it in is Cinderbrew Meadery. Main reason I like it there is that you get Spirit Bomb and Cycle of Binding. I think anytime you are going to drop Brand Spread or play Fellsguard, this build is going to be superior than that. Because you get superior to that, because you get Spirit Bomb for aggro, you have like 20-second cooldown on Sigil of Flame for aggro from Cycle of Binding. You also have Dark Lair Boon for really good aggro. So the main reason to play Fellsguard was to have smooth aggro, but this build actually has really smooth aggro while playing Eldrachi, so you get the self-sustain benefits and just the overall DPS benefits of having Eldrachi. And Cinderbrew Meteor I think is particularly good, so we recently did the world's fastest 18. Obviously there's been a 19 done, so we're working on that. We did the fastest 18. We look at the logs. My damage is actually pretty close with everyone else. You know, not really close with this guy, but you notice I am playing with a tank trinket since, you know, playing without Oracle Disc Priest. They can't just shield me for my whole health bar. I need to shield myself sometimes, so I have a tank trinket on. Damage seems pretty competitive even with this tank trinket. On overall, you do suffer a little bit on single target, which also means your AoE is going to be quite a bit higher. So that's the damage. I think it's fine, especially in big pool dungeons. It has really good aggro. Also, it has Cycle of Binding, which is very useful in particular in Cinderbrew Meadery and Motherlode. In Cinderbrew, you don't really need that much to stop casters, even though there are a few casters, especially in the IPA wing, where Cycle on Silence is very useful. The main reason Cycle is useful in Cinderbrew Meadery is because of IPA. You can Sigil of Chains every ad set with Cycle, whereas without Cycle, it's every other. I think that is a pretty big difference there. Also, just generally, as we mentioned, the aggro, I can't mention this enough, is super nice with this build. Just having, you know, low cooldown on Feldev, access to Spirit Bomb, low cooldown on Sigil of Flame is just infinite easier to get aggro on everything and not lose it in massive pulls. The other dungeon I was thinking about it in is Motherlode. I think it's really good in Motherlode. Motherlode is the other dungeon I was playing Fellsguard in before. However, with this build, obviously we have no aggro issues, or shouldn't have aggro issues. Also, the random trash pulls that may give you trouble, like the massive trash pull at the start, or maybe right after the first boss, they're really not that difficult. But with this build, they're really not that difficult at all. There are a couple changes I make to it. In Motherlode, I drop Ascending Flame for Void Reaver. That is a damage, like you lose 3% damage to gain 3% DR. That is mainly because of Rixa. Since we don't have Soul Crush, bosses that like do high sustained damage to the tank are a little bit more difficult. We do have the Eldrachi tree, you know, giving us high self-sustain, but Rixa can be just a little bit difficult, so I added Void Reaver to the build. It won't be as hard, I think, as if you were playing Fellsguard, but it is still somewhat difficult. I also play Focus Cleave in that dungeon, since I think as we mentioned, the big pulls aren't super dangerous. So I think it's okay to drop Soulmonger just for a little bit more single target, which this build is lacking since we're not playing Soul Crush. The other 2 dungeons I was considering it in are Priory and Floodgate. However, I eventually decided not to play it because I prefer to play Down in Flames in those dungeons. If you are not playing Down in Flames, if you're playing Illuminated Sigils, I think this build's value rises quite a bit in Priory and Floodgate. Main reason, this build doesn't really work that well with Down in Flames because a lot of the gain you get from this build is from the synergy between Cycle of Binding and Illuminated Sigils. So if you're playing Down in Flames, then you don't really want to play this. And I prefer Down in Flames in Priory and Floodgate, mainly because of some of the bosses in there are really dangerous. Like Floodgate, the first boss, Big Mama, is very dangerous. I like having Down in Flames in there if, like, you know, she gets an extra tank buster in the phase or something. Or Priory, the first boss, if you can't rely that much on healer externals, you know, Down in Flames does make that a lot easier. Dark Lair Boon, which you get with the other build, is kind of useful. So I think if you're playing Illuminated Sigils, like if you were playing this build, maybe even without Spirit Bomb in Priory and Floodgate, I think the no Soul Crush build is probably superior than that. My build, I think with Down in Flames, I prefer even more than that. So those are in Priory and Floodgate, I would still prefer to play with Down in Flames. However, if you were playing Limited Sigils before with like no Spirit Bomb or something, I think the no Soul Crush build might be better in Priory and Floodgate. And in Meadery and Motherlode, I think it's definitely better. than any other build. In the other 4 dungeons, I think it's probably better to stick with Soul Crush. In TOP, the target counts are really low. So like the AoE gain that you're getting from Spirit Bomb and Cycle is not nearly as pronounced. Same thing with Workshop. After the first pull, the target counts are extremely low, so you don't really need the extra aggro you get from Spirit Bomb and Cycle Binding. You'd rather just have the higher single target and self-sustain from Soul Crush. I already talked about Rookery. I think is kind of on the borderline, although I think I still prefer to play Down in Flames with Soul Crush rather. I think technically you could play the no Soul Crush build in here, but it might not be as good as we're hoping for. So I kind of just stick with no Spirit Bomb. Also, you don't like need Spirit Bomb or Cycle for anything really in Rookery. I think it's less value to play it, but you could play it in Rookery. Just I think not that important. In DFC, I think it would actually be better for everything except the Candle King to play without Soul Crush. However, the Candle King is like the hardest part of this dungeon. So I think it's better to keep Soul Crush just to make sure you don't need any healing whatsoever on the Candle King. Also, I have not tested this, but I'm relatively sure the damage from Eerie Molds on the Candle King counts as environmental, which means it's not affected by souls. And, you know, since you're not playing Soul Crush, you are quite reliant on healing from souls, which means you may require healing on the Candle King, which is not good. You do not want to be requiring healing on the Candle King. So I stick with Soul Crush and Dark Flame Cleft and the 3 other dungeons we mentioned. So there are a couple gameplay changes from this build that you will see compared to the normal build. So the first thing, obviously, is that we have Cycle, which means that the cooldowns of Sigil of Silence, Sigil of Chain, Sigil of Misery, and even Sigil of Spite are going to be significantly lower. And also Sigil of Flame even is on a 20-second cooldown, so you can just spam your sigils way more often. If there's like casters or whatever, obviously mentioned in IPA, you can Sigil of Chains every ad set, which is super nice. Also, we have access to Spirit Bomb. So we are already playing a soul-focused build, which means we're, you know, prioritizing generating souls, not capping fractures, pushing Immolation Aura off cooldown unconditionally, etc. Which means we're naturally going to land in the spot where it's good to push Spirit Bomb, which is if you have 4+ souls outside of meta or 3 souls in meta, you want to push Spirit Bomb. There are also a couple of Spirit Bomb combos. Mainly you want to consider these like with Firebrand up, since you have Fire Demise. I'll demo them here. So the first one is going to be Sigil of Spite. This is the old combo people did all the time. So we're assuming Firebrand is up. It's Sigil of Spite, Spirit Bomb, and then do 1 global, which can be Sigil of Flame, and then Spirit Bomb again. The reason you do the 1 global is that these souls you get from Sigil of Spite take a while to spawn in. It doesn't just insta give you 5 souls. So the reason you use 1 global between is so that you don't accidentally eat, you know, Spirit Bomb without 5 souls that you got from Sigil of Spite. So that 1 global, the best one is Sigil of Flame. However, it can be Spellblade, Fracture, or Immolaura. Obviously, if it's Immolaura, you're going to be massively overcapping souls, but that is okay because, you know, we're playing Eldrachi, we overcap souls anyway all the time. The other one is with Soul Carver, so I wouldn't worry too much about this one, but you can do it for a little min-max. So you get to 2 souls, and then it's Soul Carver, Spirit Bomb, and then Fracture, and then Spirit Bomb again. So the way that works is that Soul Carver gives you 3 souls immediately when you use it. So you start at 2 souls, and you Soul Carver, and you're at 5 souls, so Spirit Bomb. Then it starts giving you other souls, and you can Fracture to supplement those to get up to 5, and you Spirit Bomb again. That is kind of useful to do with Firebrand. Also, you notice they're both 1-minute cooldown, so it does kind of line up that way that you can use it every Firebrand. Sigil of Spite is also 1-minute cooldown, but you have Cycle of Binding, so it's going to be lower cooldown than 1 minute in the dungeons, and I don't think you want to be holding it. So you'd only do the other combo if it actually lines up. Having Spirit Bomb is also very useful with the Eldrachi tree. So one thing you can do, I'm not going to like build enough souls to actually demo it here, but basically, if you don't want to proc Thrill to Fight, like let's say you have Thrill to Fight up for like 5 seconds right now, and you proc the first part of your combo, instead of pushing Soul Cleave, you can just push Spirit Bomb. And then, you know, you're not proccing your combo, and if you're not like overriding a Thrill to Fight that you already had. Obviously that wasn't a good test because I started with no souls, but hopefully you get the idea from that. All right, I think that is going to be it. We've covered pretty much everything, what dungeons to play it in, how I stumbled upon the build, and why it's actually good. So that is going to be it for the video. Thank you all for watching. Peace out.